at Colorado College. I use he, him, his pronouns. Glad everybody's here today, and thank you for coming. Today we've got a few panelists from community partners and student organizations at CC, and we're going to be learning a little bit about the work these folks are doing in our community and how we can get involved and things like that, get some good conversations going about our issue area for our coalition, which is poverty and inequity, and of which I am the issue organizer in the CCE issue-based co-op. And while we're just waiting on maybe a few more people to join, I'd like to ask our panelists today just to give a quick introduction. Maybe just say your name, where you're from, what organization you're here representing, and how about let's do your favorite food. So can we start with Misbah?
Hi y'all, I'm Misbah, pronouns she, her, and I'm representing CC Mutual Aid. I'm a first year and a feminist and gender studies major, and my favorite food lately, I've been really missing my mom's homemade biryani, so I'll just say that that would be my favorite food right now. Should I popcorn it to somebody?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll popcorn it to Andy. Oh, there's two of them. Oh no, this is, we'll go Peterson, yes.
Wonderful, thank you. I am Andy Peterson, the Director of Development at The Place. It's an organization that works with youth in homelessness here in the Pikes Peak region. My primary function is to make sure that we have the financial resources to serve these young people every day. My favorite food is barbecued steak. How about the other Andy?
All right, thank you everybody for having me. My name is Andy Phelps. My title is I'm the Homeless Response Coordinator for the City of Colorado Springs. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. What else? What organization? I already said I work for the city. Favorite food? It's a close tie between chicken tikka masala at Little Nepal, or I like Thai Basil's yellow curry chicken. That's really good.
Welcome, patients. We're just going around with some introductions. We're just saying our name, where we're from, what organization we represent, and our favorite food to keep things interesting.
Awesome. My name is Patience Kabwasa, and originally from Ogden, Utah. I represent or am the Executive Director for Colorado Springs Food Rescue. And locally, our mission here is to cultivate a more equitable food system in the greater Colorado Springs community. And my favorite food is probably steak.
Cool. And Sophia and Nikki, did you want to introduce yourselves too?
Yeah, we can do super quick intros. Hi all, my name is Nikki Sosa, she, her pronouns. I'm the Community Partnerships Coordinator with the Collaborative for Community Engagement. Here today, kind of helping just to facilitate things and support the coalition issue-based panels. And Sophia, I'll let you do a quick intro as well. Oh, favorite food. Right now, I have really been missing Mexican food because I've been on a restrictive diet for like the last 6 to 8 months and not been able to eat garlic and onion, and recently discovered a way, or gluten, and recently discovered a way to make rellenos to follow my restrictive diet. So rellenos, that's where it's at right now for me.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophia Prey. I am another staff member with the CCE, here to support the coalitions as well. My favorite food, or something I'm craving right now, is just great sourdough bread. I've been really into baking lately, so I'm just gonna say bread for now.
All right, cool. Well, again, if you're just joining, welcome. We've got a good selection of panelists here, and hopefully we're gonna get some good conversations going about the issue of poverty and inequity in our area and how we as students and community members can get involved. So I guess we'll just jump straight into our interview. And so my first question for our panelists is, what's your connection to this issue of poverty and inequity? And could you describe like an aha moment in your life when you knew that you needed to get involved? And anyone who's got an answer can start.
Well, I will go, if that's okay. So my aha moment was, I went to college at Missouri State, where I was studying communications, I think at the time, my freshman year, and I actually moved to Los Angeles, California, the summer after my freshman year, where I did street outreach in Skid Row. And I grew up on what I call the rough edge of middle class in Kansas City. And so that experience in Skid Row that summer really opened my eyes to the type of poverty that exists in our country, specifically unsheltered homelessness. And so I always look back at that summer as being the moment that really changed the trajectory of my life and my career.
I guess I'll go next here. I was blessed to not have been homeless, but I also understand that for a time my dad was, and he actually worked very diligently to make sure that our family didn't end up in homelessness, especially when the economic times during part of my growing up was not so good, and he made sure that he didn't want us to turn out like he did for a little bit. My aha moment is really more of a kind of a journey, really, and I actually have a little bit more of a faith perspective, that it's kind of a responsibility. Of course, Jesus said that we always will have the poor around us, but what do we do about the issue of poverty? What we do about it is really a true test of how one works out our faith. And in fact, there's a question in one verse that it says, what happens if we don't help? It says, but if anyone has the world's goods and sees somebody in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? And the command to help the poor goes back to the Old Testament days, but in the New Testament, I guess, people of faith today are told to continue that practice. Let each of you look to, I think the verse is, let each of you look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. This is something that is ingrained in people of faith, and we have a large constituency here at the place that have a faith background, and they practice the command to help the poor. When I got into resource development, I saw that a majority of work was to serve the poor and to help donors exercise their gifting abilities to help provide the poor opportunity to lift themselves out of their poverty. So seeing my parents do all they could to keep us from being homeless during a few difficult years in my faith, those are my connection and my aha moment.
So I haven't lived as long. I'm only 18. But during that brief time, I have actually experienced homelessness, and I am a first generation immigrant. Well, I am the immigrant, so I am part of that first generation. And so with a lot of living in low income areas and being from Houston, Texas, so where a lot of the divide between the rich and the poor is very obviously seen in zip codes and area codes. You can kind of really tell really quickly that poverty is a really big player in your life if it affects you. And with that, I kind of just had to realize that it is a greater system at hand and not just something that is an individual problem, and not just like something that you can get out of it by pursuing the American dream. And so with that, I kind of ran to a lot of just resources and whatever I can do to help my situation, since even going to college for me is a privilege, and especially one such as CC. And with that privilege, I wanted to do something that I could do to pay it forward. And in that way, as an homage to also the Black Panther Party survival programs, we launched CC Mutual Aid, and the second I heard about it, I wanted to be a part of it and have been trying to make sure that it does the most good for everybody involved, and kind of just trying to like change the actual systems that create, or in a very minute way, or just in a way change how reality is seen in order to make it more equitable, because I feel like the systems are typically overlooked, and as much as I can to change that, I would try to. But my specific aha moment would probably be that it's a very long process of just realizing that there is a greater system working against people who are impoverished, and not just something that is your individual fault, and your individual fault for being homeless, or not having enough money to put food on the table, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Misbah, for bringing that up, because that really actually segues. I think my aha moment has also been more of a journey, and it's also been more happened through my own personal experiences of, first of all, being, so on my father's side, I'm first generation American. On my mother's side, third generation. So come from a family of immigrants. And because I am multiracial, I have been able to see really how intersection really affects poverty, and how race, class, and privilege absolutely attribute to those things on a personal level. And I think, my journey walking through what it has looked like to, move from poverty myself, and then my faith has been incredibly influential in that. And also, wrestling with that same, why will the poor always be with us? And the truth of the matter is it's frustrating, because sometimes it's looked at as, if we teach people to lift themselves up out of it, like it ignores the actual systems at play that are contributing. There's literally been policy written that do hold people down. So, in my mind, the truth of why the poor will always be with us is because greed will. And that is exasperated in income disparity. And as as the middle class continues to shrink, we see those consequences just further and further, what it looks like to just be able to even obtain a livable wage in the system. And so I think for me, just seeing those things, and as I have taken steps in my own life, and just watching how those things have played out, or what those systems were at play for myself, as far as even obtaining education, having housing, being able to access, fresh food in my community, transportation, like all of those things are interconnected, and they do speak to quality of life. And so I think, as those things as I've unraveled those things, or like really tried to understand them from my own experience of trying to move away from that has become my aha moments.
Thank you guys for sharing. I think we had like a pretty good range of like personal connections and stuff. It was good to hear everybody's different perspective on that. I know like for my personal connection, it was like there are like different aspects of your individual stories that I could like relate to, like with, coming from like a place of faith, or also like personal experience, and yeah, it was just cool to hear. I kind of want to change gears a little bit. Now that we know a little bit more about people's backgrounds in this area, I want to hear a little more about what work you and the organization that you are a part of are doing locally to, I guess, address the issue, or yeah, what specific things are you guys doing that relates to poverty and inequity locally?
Oh, Patience, I saw you unmute. So you
can... Oh, no, go ahead. Okay.
So CC Mutual Aid, what we've tried to do is first acknowledge the fact that we have one of the richest student populations in the entire country. We have, I'm pretty sure, at this point in time, and also realize and acknowledge and kind of just internalize the fact that we also have a very big wealth disparity, where there is also a shrinking middle class here, and it is either very, very poor and underprivileged in different senses of the word, not always income wise, but just underprivileged, period. And also a very, very class heavy and class privilege heavy class as well. And so with that, we wanted to make sure that we can have a way to redistribute that wealth in a way that is equitable and in a way that is not conditional. And it is actually a part of CC itself. So we're trying to, with that kind of establish the fact that this is a here to stay thing, and this is about to like be a part of how we as an institution perceive our class privilege and use our class privilege in ways. But instead of just monetary, this semester we're also trying to work in more non-monetary ways, which we're still trying to explore at this point. And if you have any feedback, I'm all ears. But yeah, so just ways in which that we can help redistribute wealth, or doesn't need to be monetary, or just wealth of knowledge as well. And so we're trying to see wealth of resources, knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
So at Food to Power, and formerly Colorado Springs Food Rescue until the third week of January, which we officially changed our name to Food to Power to really more reflect the breadth of the work that we are doing. So initially we started by redistributing food from one place to another to mitigate food waste, and also at the same time to address the issue of 1 and 6 people in our community going without food. And as we continue to just grow in this work and really, I think, further understand all of the different intersections that are affected, it really moved us in an organization to really look at like what it looks like to specifically access fresh food, what that looks like in a community, that maybe you are limited by transportation or you are limited by income and you have to travel, a half a days to get to and from the grocery store, which might affect the decisions that you're making because your transportation route, you're thinking about what you have to carry back. So maybe instead of choosing a bag of potatoes, you choose a candy bar, or, if you are on the bus, it might be more time efficient and economic efficient for you to hit up the dollar menu at McDonald's because it is on your best route instead of taking the extra time to go to the grocery store because there's not fresh food access literally within walking distance in your community. So all of those factors, really started to look at like, what is our part in food production? What is our part in, amending soil and producing, and doing the things to soil to make, to give us the ability to grow food. What is our role in, information sharing and being able to use food as a vehicle to help to, understand, just different ways of making things or different ways of, being our healthy and best selves, or being able to have the vitamins and minerals that we need through our food that are available to us through things that we grow. And so this year we are embarking on building a neighborhood food center in the Hillside community, which is an area in town that is one of the areas that, according to public health, has a 16.1 life expectancy difference between different other areas of Colorado Springs. And we know that the access to fresh food is absolutely a part of that. So one way that we do that, we still continue to redistribute fresh food to 8 no-cost grocery programs around the city. The pandemic has changed things. We had to overnight convert our office into a food distribution center to just keep what was most needed during this time. Folks needing to be able to get fresh food, soil cycles. So another way that we've started a social enterprise where we have a pay for service composting service, and we're able to, pick up compost from customers' homes, and then be able to turn that into soil that then grows our food. And then finally, our Fly internship, which is a youth program, food systems leadership for youth. We are able to, work with young people, talk about food justice. What is food justice? They start to ask critical questions about, why is there not a grocery store in my community? And there are 5, in another community. And they're able to do this work as, through paid or through a stipend. So we are really working to address the economic factors that also are present in why people make the type of food choices that they make.
I guess I will go next. I started at the city about 3 years ago. This position was a new position when I started. I was super excited whenever I saw this position open because I got my master's in social work where I focused on homeless policy. So this is kind of my dream job, to be honest. So I've been there for about 3 years, and my main job as a homeless response coordinator is that I represent the city on the issue of homelessness. So any community outreach or any media inquiries, I'm the person the city kind of pushes out there on the issue of homelessness. I answer all the complaints that come into the city about homelessness. And being that is the #1 complaint that the city gets, are homeless related complaints, that does keep me pretty busy. I also help with funding decisions at the city. We get about $4.5 to $5 million a year of community development block grant and emergency solutions grant from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So nonprofits like the Place, for example, will come and apply for those funds. And I'm a part of that team that makes those funding decisions. But I'll say that my favorite part of my job is that I get to help lead the city's strategy when it comes to responding to homelessness. And so the main thing that I've done in the last 3 years is I developed what's called the Homelessness Initiative. And so that is the city's plan, short-term plan to fight homelessness in our community. And I'm not going to bore you guys with all 10 of those objectives in that plan, but you can actually read that on my website at helpcos.org. I'll tell you that we met every single objective in that plan. Some of the things that I'm proudest of, when I came into this position, we did not have enough shelter beds. The shelters were routinely full in the wintertime. I was having to stand up these pretty quickly, organized warming shelters every winter. That's very difficult to do. And we had people dying outside. Unfortunately, we still do. And I'll share this with you guys. One of the saddest parts of my job is that every time someone in our community passes away, that's someone that's experiencing homelessness, I get the autopsy report sent to me from the coroner's office. So it's something that I am unable to ignore because that's part of my job, is to track all the homeless related deaths in our community. This is a stack I got last week. This is everybody from last year. And so for me, when I came into this role, my number one goal was, how do we get an adequate amount of low barrier shelter beds in our community? And so I went in front of city council and asked them for $500,000 per year. And I'm happy to say that we get that now. And that might not seem like a lot of money, the $500,000 a year, but if you understand how city government in Colorado Springs works, you'll know that this is a very conservative community, that many people in elected positions do not believe it's the role of government to care for the vulnerable populations. And so to me, that was a really big win to get that $500,000 a year. And so those funds are used to provide low barrier shelter beds in our community. Those funds were used by Springs Rescue Mission to help build their entry shelter on their campus. Another program that came out of the Homeless Initiative is that I started a program called Work COS. And so that's a homeless work program at the city, where the city is actually hiring people experiencing homelessness to do median maintenance work in our community. And they're decent jobs. They're $15 an hour in our community. And we work with Springs Rescue Mission and Catholic Charities. They feed us applicants as we get openings. Currently, we have 7 people working in that program, and I'm advocating very hard for 2021 for us to possibly triple the size of that program, because it's been so successful. We've had 2 people go on to full-time city jobs. I also developed an outreach program with the fire department called Homeless Outreach Program. We're very creative at the city. And so that's 2 teams of 2. Each team has a paramedic and a mental health practitioner, and they're doing homeless outreach in our downtown community, because it's clear that, having shelter beds is good, right? It saves lives, but we have to have professionals out on the streets building relationships with people so we can get them connected to services in our community. It takes a lot of time and a lot of trust building with people out on the streets. Another thing I'm proud of is I launched what's called the Homeless Outreach Court Program. And the reason that came about, I always give kind of the status quo example. If someone is cited for a homeless related crime or ordinance, like camping on public property, inevitably they don't show up to court, then the judge issues a bench warrant. Next time the police see that person, they're arrested and taken to jail, and then immediately released, because camping on public property is a non-jailable offense. So basically what we had is a very large and an expensive revolving door that connected no one to services. So just a giant waste of taxpayer money. And so I went to city leadership with that argument that we're wasting money. We're not actually making any impact by doing this. And so what this Homeless Outreach Court Program does is, now when someone is cited for something like camping on public property, they're given a choice between the status quo, which is that fine, or they can agree to meet with a case manager at a nonprofit to start working on whatever goals they want to set for themselves. Is that a silver bullet? No, it's not. But what it is it's another option for people to get connected to help. If you read my if you read the city's homeless initiative, you'll see kind of a common thread through all of the goals. And the goal with all of them, all the objectives, is to increase access to shelter, services, and housing. Because I truly believe that writing tickets will never end homelessness. It just won't. That is, in my opinion, just a criminalization of poverty. It doesn't actually help anyone, it actually hurts people. I believe that by increasing access to services, that's where the real hope is in our community. Another thing that came out of the homeless initiative is that the city agreed to write an affordable housing plan for our city, which again, if you understand our city government, that's a big deal. And so the reason we added that in there is that affordable housing, or the lack thereof, is really the elephant in the room when it comes to homelessness. Until we get an adequate supply of affordable housing in our community, I do not see the situation of homelessness improving as much as we would like it to. And last but not least, everyone's lives changed last year with COVID, and mine included. And so last March, when all this kind of started in our community, I kind of had a panic moment of, what are we going to do? Like, if COVID breaks out in our shelters, this is going to be very bad. Like, we had a fear of just mass death in our shelter system because, for example, at Springs Rescue Mission, we have 450 people in bunk beds, right? If we have a COVID outbreak there, that's not going to be good. And so what I did is I worked with community partners, including the hospital systems and the health department, and we stood up the homeless isolation shelter at the city auditorium. And so that has been my life since April 1st, is I'm actually running the homeless isolation shelter at the city aud. It's still going. We currently have, I believe, 10 people there. At our peak in late November, we had around 55 people positive with COVID that were staying in that shelter. So the trend is looking good, knock on wood, but we'll keep it open as long as we need to.
As Andy mentioned, the place has benefited from the city, and Andy, I want to thank you for advocating on the behalf of the homeless population, and particularly for the youth here that we serve. The place is the only organization in the Pikes Peak region with youth-specific programs and services to help young people exit homelessness and live what we would like to see as a self-determined, fulfilled life. We have 3 pillar programs, a street outreach program, a shelter, and a housing program, and each brings intensive case management to the youth. The outreach program is designed to provide food, water, warm clothes in the wintertime, sunblock, and chapstick in the summertime, whatever they need, wherever they are. But mainly our team's goal is to help youth learn that they can have a trusting relationship with an adult and that they have options to exit homelessness. We have a 20-bed shelter that provides 3 meals a day, showers and hygiene, laundry facilities. But again, case management is what helps change their trajectories. Substance abuse therapy, mental health therapy. They ask, the case managers will ask, what's your path? Is it education? If you will earn $10,000 more per year if you graduate from high school, more than those who don't graduate from high school. So there's some motivation there to finish schooling. Employment, you want to get a job and get out on your own? We will help you fill out that job application and write a resume and prepare for an interview. We will even provide the clothes you need for the interview as well. One of our former youth is now a manager at a pizza restaurant downtown. And finally, we have housing. Housing, basically, it's pretty vast, but it helps youth become as independent as their situation allows. And again, the case management will work with all of them all the way till their 25th birthday.
Thank you again for sharing all those great things that y'all are doing. But I guess then the follow-up question to hearing about what you all are doing is, finding out about how students can get involved in the work that you're doing. I understand that in the pandemic, it's kind of tough with a lot of like school restrictions and like municipal, state, and federal restrictions on what is allowed and what isn't. But I wanted to see if there were any opportunities either that are currently happening or that you know will happen in the future that students can get involved in the organizations that you all are representing.
If I can go first on this question, I am the Director of Development at the place, and my go-to answer is always about funding. 2/3 to 3/4 of our budget are salaries. These are the people who work directly with the youth to be able to help them change their trajectories from homelessness to a better situation. If we don't have the financial resources to pay our case managers and direct care employees, then we won't be able to effectively fulfill our mission. The amount for one youth to access all of our services for one day is $104. We have to prepare for our capacity of 20 youth at the shelter, whether it's full or not. And that daily amount adds up to $2,080 a day. The average stay for a youth in the shelter is 4 to 6 weeks. For one youth to stay 4 weeks, that amount is almost $3,000. So funding is really critical in my mind. This happens to be our 20th anniversary of serving youth here in Colorado Springs. Over 20 years, the place has helped an estimated 7,650 young people since launching in 2000. 1 in 3 young people that engaged in our shelter or outreach programs permanently exited homelessness. That's 2,525 youth over 2 decades. Now, work with me here. And Andy, I know you might dispute the number, the base number that we use on this, but that's, we could talk about that another time. But what we figured that if the 2,525 young people who permanently exited homelessness were to instead be on the street as a chronically homeless adult for just 1 year, they could cost taxpayers $89 million. So a financial gift to the place is an investment in our region's future. And if students want to raise funding for the place, that would be awesome. They can call us about opportunities to do that. But one that I like to mention is our Night Out project in November. Instead of doing a fun run or a walkathon, people sign up to sleep outside without a tent, in the sleeping bag under a tarp or in a box. And they ask people to support them through sponsorship. Not only does it raise funds for the place, it raises awareness to the issue of youth and homelessness. And there are other ways to give back through volunteerism or by donating what's on our needs list. And you can find all that on our website at theplacecos.org.
So for CC students specifically, if y'all just want to be an organizer, y'all can just shoot anybody an email. I'll probably put the email in the chat, but we have Colorado College Mutual Aid at gmail.com and mutual aid at coloradocollege.edu. Or I can put my personal email in there and y'all can just join a group me, and that's how we work. We function completely virtually. But we have also been, since we've also been trying to consider how to be mutual aid that's non-monetary, we've also been trying to strategically think of things and just trying to figure out how it would best work to serve the community that we are aware of. So we would love feedback or ideas or brainstorming. And like Andy mentioned, funding, redistribution of wealth doesn't happen if you don't do the actual investment into our community. And so if you do have any class privilege and if you do have any wealth privilege of any sort, feel free to use that crowdfund link and donate some of it. and just invest in your own community. That's kind of the basis of it. Or just if you're not able to, and that is completely fine and completely okay, just sharing it with somebody, or on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, wherever you can think of, that would also help us a lot, because we've also been trying to get in touch with other mutual aids and see where we can, as an institution that is collaborative and just non-hierarchical in nature, we're trying to collab with anybody we can and just learn wherever we can. So if you just share our stuff, that's also just as helpful.
Well, I'm going to put our website.
You've remuted yourself.
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that. I put our web address in the chat, so anyone who's interested can check us out there. We are always looking for volunteers to do food recovery shifts. They're very COVID safe and minimal contact. We do also do some deliveries for seniors who are immune compromised and aren't unable to go to the store because of risks around COVID. And so always looking for volunteers to help with those deliveries. Again, also very safe and low contact. And we are finishing up our fundraising for the Hillside Hub. And so we are looking for donor advocates to kind of help us get over that finish line so that we can finish building this neighborhood food center and just its impact on our community.
So I always tell my students at UCCS that if they want to help, my first thing I tell them to do is to please vote. The people making the funding decisions at the local, state, and federal level, they're placed there by voters. So please vote. It's important. Funding decisions matter. I often have to explain that to many of my friends who think that politics don't matter. Yeah, maybe not to them, but definitely they matter to vulnerable populations in our country because they're directly impacted by funding or, usually the lack thereof. I mentioned before, we get $4.5 to $5 million a year from Department of Housing and Urban Development. That is nowhere close to what we need to make as big of an impact as we would like in our community. I also would encourage you to communicate with elected officials at the federal, state, and local level, but primarily at the local level. You can really make a difference at the local level. You will be heard. You can show up to city council right now via Teams or Zoom, but it's not hard to communicate with an elected official here locally. So write emails, call, show up to meetings. It does make a difference. I can tell you I work at the city, so I'm in those meetings, right? They notice whenever there's a lot of people calling in. So get organized. That's important, and show up and communicate. Also run for office. I would love to see more Gen Z running for office in our community. I think there's going to be a ballot issue next spring, I believe, where they're going to be looking at raising pay for city council. Right now, I think they only make $7,000 a year. And so what that does is that helps ensure that the only people that are running for city council are retired military, mainly. And so in order to get more diversity on council, there's a group in town that's looking to get a ballot issue to raise that pay to, I think, $60,000 a year. And last but not least, you can always volunteer at places like The Place, for example, or any of these amazing organizations represented today. And you can go again to helpcos.org at the city, and you can look at a pretty exhaustive list of ways to get involved in our community.
That's great. Yeah, thanks everybody for all these great opportunities. Andy from The Place, I participated in the night out this past November. So for any of the anybody that's in the audience right now, I would definitely recommend it as a pretty powerful experience, sort of to reflect on what people have to go through, and sort of as a reflection on your privilege that we as CC students don't have to sleep outside without a tent.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I think based off the time, we should probably move to our open Q&A session. So if there's anybody in the audience that had any questions as we were talking today, I'd welcome you to go ahead and ask. You could also type your questions into the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that. It's up to you.
I had a question. I had a question regarding volunteering at Food to Power. I was wondering where on the website we could find the place to volunteer.
Sure. So they're under food recovery. There's under the menu. There's a tab specifically for volunteers. Are you looking at it now?
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome.
I had a question. So I know that Colorado Springs has a large veteran population. So I wanted to know, how does that group impact, I guess, the city of Colorado Springs or the place, or really anything that has to do with like homelessness and poverty in the area?
So I'd like to mention another thing that came out of the initiative is I created a fund in town called the Pikes Peak Veteran Housing Fund. And I did a fundraiser with the mayor early March. Thank God we did that fundraiser when we did, because a week later that probably wouldn't have happened. But anyways, in one day we raised $100,000 for that fund. And so that fund exists for the sole purpose of getting veterans experiencing homelessness into housing. And we're working with Homes for All Veterans here in town on that. I can tell you that, when you look at the numbers, if you're a veteran, you are overrepresented in our homeless population, meaning that if you're a veteran, you are more likely to become homeless in our community. There's a lot of support in our community for homeless veterans, not just the VA, but multiple nonprofits like Rocky Mountain Human Services, Homes for All Veterans, Mount Carmel. There's a whole bunch. I hope that answered your question. Sorry.
It did, thank you.
Is it inappropriate if I have a question? So basically I was wondering so I learned the fact that actually housing, in addition to the fact that it's affordable, we just don't have enough period for our population. And I was wondering if the city of Colorado Springs was doing anything about it, or just like what kind of the situation is, and especially like within the next 5 years, I believe it was going to get worse and worse. So yeah, I just wanted to know.
So that's a really big question. And I'm a social worker, right? And so it's getting a little bit outside of my bailiwick with answering that question. But the housing plan at the city is called Home COS. So if you Google Home COS, the first result on Google will take you to that plan. So I would encourage you to read that. I can tell you there's not a lot of consensus in our community on the best way to get an adequate housing supply, right? Some people believe it needs government intervention, right, on the left. Some people think we need to make it easier for developers to build housing, right? Incentivize. So I can tell you that the plan has more of the incentivizing of developers to get housing built. And that's just, purely a reflection of our community. But I would encourage you to read Homes COS. There's a lot more details there. One of the things that the city is doing more in my line of work is that we are helping nonprofits with land acquisition. So we will just pay for the land in order for them to build housing specifically for people experiencing homelessness. So an example of that would be like Greenway Flats that's on Springs Rescue Mission's campus. That was a public-private partnership between City of Colorado Springs, Norwood Developments, Springs Rescue Mission. And they utilize what are called low-income tax credits from the state level. Again, government matters, right? Without those low-income tax credits from the state, that housing would not have been built. Because one thing that's clear is that there is not a profit to be made in helping people in poverty. It's not a profit there. So somebody has to step up to help, either the government or charities, or in my opinion, it takes both. So yes, Greenway Flats is a great example of one thing the city did in supporting a nonprofit to build housing. And there's a few more like that, like Freedom Springs was just built for formerly homeless veterans on county property, but the city helped with that as well.
I just popped this question in the chat, but I'm very curious about how you all go about evaluating some of your programs, considering that some of the issues that your programs are working to address are very complex. So I'm just curious about kind of strategies and approaches there, and also thinking about how evaluation can oftentimes lead to additional resources and help justify what programs and the work you are doing. So I'm curious if anyone has thoughts on that.
Patience, were you going to go? I was going to let you go first. No? Okay. Well, I can tell you that the city, whenever we make funding decisions, we are looking at past performance. And Andy knows this very well. Whenever a nonprofit submits an application to the city for funding, it's a pretty, pretty difficult application process. And we're looking at their outcomes. How many people did they get into housing? We look at housing retention. Were they able to keep them in housing? Were they able to help grow income or increase income for that individual? And I'm sure Andy can speak a lot more of the measures we're looking at, but we utilize a lot in our community a system called the Homeless Management Information System or software. So we have a computer software used statewide, where if you are a person experiencing homelessness, getting services from a nonprofit, that information is getting entered into the system, and we're able to pull pretty detailed reports out of that system. So we're able to see specifically how nonprofits are doing in our community in regards to outcomes. And I can, just to brag on the place, they're a really good example of a nonprofit that has great outcomes. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is that they're utilizing best practices, evidence-based, research-based practices in ending homelessness. So yeah, I can tell you that we try to be good stewards of taxpayer money and not just throw money to whoever, right? We're trying to give money to organizations that have proven results.
That's so true. Thank you, Andy. And yes, the city's application process is pretty extensive, and I'm fortunate to not have to do that myself. There are other smarter people in the organization that actually take that on and kind of know what the best practices are for serving youth in homelessness, and what are the trends, what's a good benchmark that we should be reaching in this particular fiscal year or calendar year. And the issue is that youth in homelessness is increasing every year. And when we see a drop in a particular program like our outreach program? Is it due to the fact that there are fewer youth in homelessness? No, we had a drop because COVID. Actually, the youth actually tucked themselves away, so they weren't as accessible. They didn't go to the libraries. We went to the creeks and wherever else they were hanging out. Usually hanging out, and during COVID, they were hidden. They kind of stayed away. The year before that, we had a drop because of a funding issue, and we didn't get a big grant to be able to help fund it. But we are at full capacity this year, and we expect the whole COVID thing to kind of change a little bit. It might be what it was last year. Last year we served 394 youth in our outreach program, and it had been 600 before that. So we did notice a drop, but there's a reason. We know the reason why some of those changes happen. But yeah, we want to make sure that we're doing things according to best practice and measuring in a way that is kind of standard to what organizations that fund us, like the city and foundations, want to know.
So I would say that we really value our partnerships and just the ability to work in coalitions and being able to share information about what works and what hasn't worked. We also, included in those partnerships are people who have smarter data than us, like El Paso County Public Health, to kind of help guide us in areas that are experiencing different or higher levels of poverty. And we really do value residents and stakeholders of a particular community and neighborhood. What is their feedback? So in addition to the numbers, growing the amount of food that we're able to redistribute and get into the homes of families, just really, listening and having systems that we can listen to what stakeholders feel like are the best solutions to the food insecurity issues in their neighborhood or community.
Yeah, I want to echo Patience's last point. I feel like what stakeholders think is the essential way that we work. We just started last semester, coming up to a year now. So we're still learning, and our biggest thing is just feedback. And sometimes, honestly, you just get this little feeling in your heart like, no, we could be doing better. And we honestly try to rely on that, because all of us are just came together for a thing that we wanted to do. And so if we're doing it right and if we're committed, then we kind of do rely on our organizers as well, and just make sure that we're upholding ourselves to a standard that we have committed ourselves to. And additionally, just making sure that we're trying to redistribute in the way that the people in the community want us to, and adapting to the needs of the community. And yeah.
Thank you again, everybody. This has been really good. Yes, thank you, Sophia. You too. I just want to say thanks again to everybody who came, especially to our panelists. You all were gave a lot of great insight into what you've been doing locally and how we can get involved. I think we all learned something, probably learned a lot, and look forward to working with you all in the future. And yeah, if people have additional questions that didn't get answered, I'm sure some of our panelists are willing to have people reach out to them. Yeah, I see some panelists putting their contact info. And yeah, again, thank you, everybody. And I hope to see you at our next Poverty and Inequity Coalition meeting, which will probably happen either at the end, towards the end of this month or next month. Yeah, patience.
That disregard the hand up. I didn't have a question.
Okay, well, I think that just about does it for everybody. Again, thank you all for coming. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye.